A little girl, barely 6 years old, lived on the harsh streets of the city, selling candy at traffic lights with bare feet and a dirty face. She was invisible to everyone, until the day a powerful millionaire stopped his luxury car, completely disoriented. What happened when their paths crossed would reveal a buried secret that would change their lives forever. Subscribe to the channel for heartwarming stories every day. The morning dawned grey over the towering skyscrapers of the metropolis. The drizzle wasn't enough to wash away the grime from the streets, nor to deter the small figure darting between. The cars stopped at the traffic light. Her bare feet skipped nimbly between the puddles, and her faded dress clung to her skinny body. The girl was only 6 years old, but her gaze carried the weight of someone who had lived for decades. While balancing a box of colorful candies, her eyes quickly scanned the drivers, looking for the least hostile faces. She had developed a sixth sense for this. She knew how to distinguish who would roll down the window, who would pretend not to see her, who would complain about her presence. "Mister, wanna buy some candy? It's fresh!" Her raspy voice cut through the air, competing with horns and the incessant noise of traffic. A few miles away, in a penthouse apartment with a panoramic view of Central Park, the millionaire awoke from yet another restless night. The deep circles under his eyes contrasted with the elegance of his silk pajamas and the impeccably decorated surroundings. Not even the 1,000-thread-count Egyptian cotton sheets could provide him with the rest he so craved. He got up slowly, dragging his feet to the window. His financial empire grew every day, while his personal universe seemed increasingly empty. The walls of the penthouse, although filled with priceless works of art, seemed to suffocate him with their oppressive silence. "Breakfast is served, sir," announced the housekeeper without receiving a response. She was used to it. The boss rarely spoke, rarely smiled. He simply nodded and plunged back into his dark thoughts. The millionaire carefully put on his custom-made Italian suit. He adjusted his silk tie in front of the mirror, observing the face that not even he recognized anymore. The financial newspapers hailed him as a business genius, the man who turned everything he touched into gold. What no one knew was that inside, he felt like the poorest person in the world. That morning, something unusual happened. He dismissed the chauffeur and decided to drive himself to an important meeting in a neighborhood he rarely frequented. He needed to clear his head, to feel in control of something, even if it was just the steering wheel of the car. Meanwhile, the little girl counted the coins she had earned in the first hours of the morning. It wasn't much, maybe enough for a roll, and if she was lucky, a little milk. She sighed deeply and returned to the corner. She couldn't give up. She didn't have that luxury. The clouds darkened even more, foreshadowing a storm. Pedestrians hurried their pace. Cars sped up. The girl's invisibility became almost complete. No one wanted to stop the car, roll down the window, wet the interior of the vehicle to buy a simple piece of candy. In his gleaming Maybach, the millionaire consulted the GPS. The screen froze, then went completely blank. He cursed under his breath. He realized he had entered an unfamiliar area of the city. He looked for his cell phone, but remembered leaving it on the bedside table, an unforgivable mistake for a methodical man like him. The rain intensified, making visibility almost nil. He felt his breathing quicken, his heart race. It wasn't just the geographical coordinates he had lost at that moment. It was something deeper. A sense of loss of control that he hadn't experienced since that day, the day that changed everything. He pulled the car over to the side of the road, feeling a wave of nausea and dizziness. He opened the door and stepped out into the open air, ignoring the rain that soaked his expensive suit. He needed to breathe. He needed to orient himself. He needed to escape the memories that suddenly attacked him like vultures. And it was there, disoriented in the rain, that two completely opposite worlds were about to collide. The traffic light girl and the lost millionaire. The rain fell harder now, turning the streets into small rivers that dragged the accumulated garbage in the gutters. The girl sought shelter under the awning of a closed store, hugging the box of candies against her chest to protect it from the humidity. That's when she spotted the imposing silhouette of a man standing in the rain next to a car that seemed out of place in that poverty-stricken setting. There was something strange about the figure. He wasn't the type of person who usually frequented those streets. The soaked suit still maintained its elegance, even clinging to the trembling body. The man seemed disoriented, with a lost look and panting breath. The girl hesitated. Approaching strangers was always a risk, but something about that momentary vulnerability made her feel curiously powerful. "Mister, do you need help?" she asked, her voice hoarse from shouting for attention on the street corners. The millionaire turned abruptly, startled by the childish voice that had come out of nowhere. He stared at the small figure who was watching him with big, curious eyes. Eyes that, despite the dust and the hunger stamped on her thin face, shone with an innocence he believed no longer existed in the world. He nodded slightly, unable to verbalize his disorientation. He was lost, literally and emotionally. The panic attack that had seized him had come without warning, bringing back memories he had buried under layers and layers of obsessive work. "Are you sick, mister?" the little girl insisted, approaching cautiously. "You're shaking." I'm fine," he finally managed to answer, his hoarse voice betraying his condition. "I just need to find the way to Oakwood Estates." The little girl's eyes lit up with recognition. "I know where that is. That's where the big houses with gardens are, right? You can get there through a shortcut without going through the traffic." On Main Street, the millionaire hesitated. Trusting a street child seemed imprudent, but his options were limited. The GPS didn't work, he had no cell phone, and he felt too weak to seek help elsewhere. "Can you show me the way?" he asked, trying to regain some composure. The girl nodded energetically, momentarily forgetting the cold and hunger. "I can. I know all the streets around here, but you'll have to walk a little. Your car can't go through the alleys." Reluctantly, the millionaire locked the vehicle and followed the unlikely little guide. The rain had subsided to a drizzle, but both were already completely soaked. The little girl skipped ahead, occasionally turning to check if he was still following her. As they traversed narrow alleys and side streets, the millionaire observed the details of that universe so distant from his own. The walls covered in graffiti, the people sleeping on cardboard under overpasses, the smell of cheap food mixed with the stench of sewage. It was as if he were in a foreign country, despite being only a few miles from his luxurious apartment. The girl talked non-stop, pointing out places and telling little stories about the neighborhood. The millionaire listened to her in silence, still battling the remnants of the panic attack. For some reason, he didn't understand. The childish and carefree chatter calmed his breathing, anchoring him in the present. "You don't talk much, do you?" she commented, frowning. "Are you too important to talk to little people like me?" The direct question caught him off guard. "It's not that, I just don't have much to say." "Everyone has something to say," she retorted with surprising wisdom. "Sometimes you just need someone who wants to listen." Something in those simple words caused a crack in the armor that the millionaire had built around himself. For a brief moment, he felt like talking, like confiding, like telling the little stranger about the weight he had carried for so many years. But the moment passed when they reached a wider street, where they could see in the distance the first signs of the upscale neighborhood that was his destination. "We're almost there," announced the girl, reaching out her hand for him to hold as they crossed a busy street. The millionaire looked at that dirty little hand extended towards him. He hesitated for a second before accepting it. Human touch, something he had avoided for so long, provoked a strange sensation in his chest. Something dormant was beginning, very slowly, to awaken. The sun finally broke through the clouds when they arrived at the entrance to the upscale neighborhood. The contrast was stark. On one side, imposing houses protected by high walls. On the other, the harsh reality of the streets they had walked through. The millionaire felt an inexplicable discomfort, as if he were betraying something or someone by returning to his privileged world. "Okay, now you know where you are," said the girl, letting go of his hand and taking 2 steps back, suddenly aware of the invisible boundary that she shouldn't cross. The man nodded, adjusting his soaked tie in an automatic gesture. He should thank her and go his way. That's what he would normally do. A brief thank you, maybe a bill as a reward, and then each would return to their particular universe. Simple as that. But something was stopping him. Perhaps it was the contrast between the strength and the fragility of that child, or the way she had guided him so confidently while he, a man accustomed to commanding financial empires, had trembled like a leaf in the wind. Do you live around here?" he asked, knowing perfectly well the answer. The girl shrugged. "I live everywhere and nowhere," she replied with disconcerting maturity. "Depends on where the night catches me." The words hit the millionaire like a punch to the stomach. For an instant, he imagined that little figure sleeping in the rain, protecting her box of candies as if it were a treasure. The image provoked an almost forgotten sensation: compassion. "Don't you have any family?" he insisted, while an inner voice rebuked him for prolonging that conversation. "Don't get involved. Don't complicate your life any further. Don't open old wounds." "I used to," she replied, kicking a pebble, "but that was a long time ago." The millionaire checked his expensive wristwatch. He was officially late for the meeting. He should call a cab, call his assistant, regain control of his meticulously organized schedule. "You must be hungry," he commented, surprising himself. "There's a deli on the corner. We can get something to eat before I go my way." The girl's eyes widened with distrust. Why? The direct question disconcerted him. Why, indeed, why care? Why deviate from his routine for a street child, one among so many that crossed his path daily without him even noticing? "Because you helped me," he replied dryly, rebuilding his distant posture. "It's just a repayment." The girl remained distrustful, but the mention of food was too tempting to refuse. "Okay, but then I'm leaving. I have to sell my candies before nightfall." In the elegant deli, the employees cast disapproving glances at the small and dirty figure who entered the establishment. The millionaire noticed, and in a rare moment of social assertiveness, glared back at them with a coldness that left no room for questioning. The message was clear: she's with me. While the girl devoured a sandwich and hot chocolate as if it were her last meal, the millionaire watched her with growing curiosity. There was something about her, something beyond the tragic situation, that intrigued him deeply. "How do you know those streets so well?" he asked, trying to maintain a casual tone. "Isn't it dangerous for someone your age?" The girl swallowed a large piece of bread before answering. "The street teaches quickly. Who wants to survive? I know where it's safe and where it's not. I know who helps and who hurts. And no one ever tried to help you. Social workers, shelters." A bitter smile, disproportionate to that childish face, appeared on the girl's lips. "You don't know what it's like in there, do you? The big guys only help when there's a camera. Filming." The millionaire's cell phone rang. His assistant had managed to track him down and sent a driver to pick him up. It was his signal to return to normal life, to leave behind that strange interlude. He stood up abruptly, placing some high-denomination bills on the table. "I have to go. This should be enough to help you for a few days." The girl didn't touch the money. She just stared at him with a disconcerting intensity. "You're lost too, aren't you? But it's not in the streets." The simple words hit an exposed nerve. The millionaire felt his heart race again, his palms sweaty. How could a child see so easily what he worked so hard to hide? "Goodbye," he said dryly, turning to leave. "And thanks for the help." As he crossed the door of the deli, he felt an immediate relief, as if escaping from an imminent danger. The executive car was already waiting for him. Soon, he would be back in his controlled world, with predictable numbers, with people he kept at a safe distance. The girl watched through the window as he got into the luxury car. A shadow of disappointment crossed her face, but not surprise. After all, people like him always left. 3 days had passed since the strange encounter. The millionaire tried to immerse himself again in the strenuous work routine he had built for himself. Meetings, reports, multi-million-dollar decisions made with the mathematical precision that had made him famous in the business world. But something had changed. In the rare pauses between appointments, he found himself thinking about the little girl from the traffic light, about the way her eyes, despite all the hardship of life, still held a spark of hope, about the way he had left her behind, as he always did with everything that threatened to touch his hardened heart. On the night of the 3rd day, while reviewing documents in his private office, he made an impulsive decision. He grabbed his car keys and left, ignoring the protests of the private security guard who insisted on accompanying him. He drove with no apparent destination, but his subconscious knew exactly where he was going. He parked near the traffic light where he had met the girl days before. The place looked different at night, darker, more menacing. He saw some figures moving in the shadows, but none was small enough to be her. "Looking for someone, mister?" asked an elderly woman who was collecting cans from a trash bin. The millionaire hesitated before answering. "A little girl, small candy seller, must be about 6 years old." The woman frowned, suspicious. "And what does a man like you want with her?" The question caught him off guard. What did he want after all? Why was he there, risking himself in a dangerous neighborhood at night, looking for a child he barely knew? "She helped me the other day. I want to return the favor," he replied dryly, realizing how weak the explanation sounded even to his own ears. The woman studied his face for a few moments before pointing to an abandoned building across the street. "Sometimes she sleeps there, with other kids." The millionaire thanked her with a nod and crossed the street. The building was an old industrial warehouse with broken windows and walls covered in graffiti. He hesitated at the entrance, suddenly feeling like an intruder, an invader of a world that didn't belong to him. "Who's there?" came a childish voice from the shadows, followed by a quick movement. "It's me, the man from the car, from the other day," he replied, feeling ridiculously inadequate. A small flashlight illuminated his face, and then the girl appeared, her eyes wide with surprise. "You came back? Why?" It was the same question he was asking himself. Why come back? Why look for her? Why not simply forget that chance encounter and move on with his perfectly organized life? "I brought food," he said, holding up a bag he had bought on the way. "And blankets. It's getting cold at night." The girl approached cautiously, like a wild animal assessing whether this was a trap. "Why do you care?" The millionaire had no answer, or maybe he did, but it was an answer he wasn't prepared to confront. Something related to the overwhelming loneliness of his luxurious penthouse. Something about how, for the first time in years, he had felt truly seen by someone. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "But I'm here." Other children began to emerge. From the shadows, attracted by the smell of food, the millionaire watched with a lump in his throat how they shared everything with each other, even having so little. How they protected the younger ones, how they had established their own system of survival. The girl sat down next to him while the others ate. "You seemed sick that day. Are you better?" The innocent question touched something deep. "I wasn't sick, at least not the way you think. It was a panic attack. Happens sometimes." "What's a panic attack?" she asked, nibbling on a sandwich. The millionaire sighed, searching for simple words. It's when the fear gets so big inside us that it feels like we're going to die, even when there's no real danger. And what are you afraid of? Big rich men shouldn't be afraid of anything. A bitter smile escaped the millionaire's lips. Everyone's afraid of something. The more you have to lose, the bigger the fear can be. But you don't seem to have anyone to lose, she observed with the brutal honesty of children. You're always alone. The words hit home like a sharp arrow. It wasn't always like that, he murmured, more to himself than to her. The girl tilted her head, curious but without pressing. Instead, she took his calloused hand between her small hands in a gesture of comfort that seemed disproportionately mature. Sometimes when I have nightmares, she said in a low voice, I pretend I'm in a safe place, with people who love me. It works for a little while. The millionaire felt something break inside him. That child who had absolutely nothing was trying to comfort him. She, who slept in abandoned buildings and shared crumbs with other forgotten children, cared about his pain. At that moment, he knew he couldn't simply turn his back again. He couldn't go back to his sterile life pretending that encounter had never happened. Something was changing within him and around him, and for the first time in years, he didn't try to resist the change. What's your name? He asked finally, realizing that they were still strangers, despite the strange connection they felt. The girl smiled, revealing a gap where a baby tooth had fallen out. Here on the street they call me Ant because I'm small, but I carry heavy things. It's a good name, replied the millionaire, with the first genuine smile in a long time. Strong like you. The visits became frequent. Every 2 or 3 days, the millionaire appeared at the same time, always bringing food, clothes, or other items of need. It wasn't charity. At least, not only that, it was something deeper, a connection that he himself didn't fully understand. The news spread quickly among the homeless people in the area. The rich man who appeared at night to talk to the abandoned children. Some distrusted his intentions, others saw an opportunity to get help. The girl, however, fiercely guarded those moments, as if they were a treasure that could be stolen at any moment. In his company, employees noticed the subtle change in the boss's behavior. The man known for his coldness and impeccable efficiency occasionally became distracted during meetings, looking out the window with a distant expression. Sometimes they caught him smiling to himself, a gesture so unusual that it generated buzz in the hallways. What do you want to be when you grow up? The millionaire asked the girl on one of the visits while they shared a package of cookies. She chewed slowly, considering the question seriously. I want to have a house, a real one, with strong walls and a door that locks. She didn't mention wealth, fame, or success. Just security, the basics that any child should have by right. The millionaire felt a pang in his chest. And what would you do in that house? I'd let other kids sleep there when it rained, she replied promptly, and I'd have lots of books. I like stories, but I can't read very well. The confession stirred something in the man. I could teach you, he offered, surprised by his own words. To read better, I mean. The girl's eyes shone with an almost painful intensity. Really? Would you do that? And so began the impromptu lessons. The millionaire brought illustrated children's books, and they sat under the dim light of flashlights while she spelled out words with fierce determination. Each night, she improved a little, absorbing knowledge like a thirsty sponge. One of those nights, after the lesson, the girl asked casually, "Why do you never talk about your family? Do you have kids?" The question hit a sensitive spot. The millionaire was silent for so long that she feared she had offended him. I had a wife, he replied finally, his voice low and controlled. She died a few years ago. And kids? His eyes clouded with such deep pain that the girl instinctively took his hand. There was a child once. He couldn't say more. The wound, even after so many years, remained open and bleeding. The girl seemed to understand what wasn't said, and with a wisdom beyond her age, delicately changed the subject. But the seed of curiosity had been planted. The following week, while the millionaire was on a business trip, the girl decided to do something risky. Gathering all her courage, she went to the building where she knew the man's office was located. The security guard at the front desk barred her immediately, threatening to call the police. "I'm looking for the man with the fancy car," she insisted, refusing to leave. "I have an important message for him." The commotion attracted the attention of the millionaire's personal assistant, who was coming down to get a coffee. "What's going on here?" "A child is causing trouble, sir," explained the security guard, holding the girl's arm more tightly than necessary. The assistant studied the ragged little girl with suspicion. There had been rumors about the boss's strange behavior in recent weeks. Could it be that this child had something to do with it? "Let her go up," he decided, to the security guard's astonishment. "I'll take responsibility." In the luxurious penthouse office, the girl looked at everything with wide eyes. She had never seen so much glass, so much shine, so much wealth displayed without fear of being stolen. While the assistant made some calls, she circled the room, absorbing every detail. That's when she saw the photograph on the desk, a woman smiling with delicate features and gentle eyes. Next to her, the millionaire, younger and almost unrecognizable, with a genuine smile on his face. In the woman's arms, a small bundle, a newborn baby. Something about that image made her freeze. There was something familiar, something that provoked a strange sensation in her memory, fragmented by years of survival on the streets. "Don't touch anything," warned the assistant, hanging up the phone. "Mister is returning from his trip tonight. You can leave a message if you want." But the girl couldn't take her eyes off the photograph. "Who is she?" she asked, pointing to the woman. The assistant hesitated. It was a sensitive subject, something that no one in the company mentioned. "That was Mister's wife. She passed away a few years ago." "And the baby?" A tense silence filled the room. "Also gone," he replied finally, with a tone that discouraged further questions. The girl felt a chill run down her spine. Something didn't fit in that story. Something she couldn't identify, but that reverberated like a distant echo somewhere in her consciousness. "Can I leave a drawing for him?" she asked, with a suddenly timid voice. The assistant sighed, checking his watch. "Be quick. I have a meeting in 10 minutes." With a piece of paper and a pencil borrowed, the girl drew with the concentration of someone performing a task of the utmost importance. When she finished, she carefully folded the paper and handed it to the assistant. "Please don't look. It's only for him to see," she asked with a seriousness that made the man nod, despite his impatience. As she was escorted out of the building, the girl cast one last look at the photograph on the desk. The image was now etched in her memory, a puzzle piece that seemed important, although she didn't know exactly why. The millionaire returned from his trip exhausted, but with a strange anxiety he hadn't felt in years. The first thing he did when he got home was check if there was time for a quick visit to the abandoned warehouse. He was about to leave when his assistant intercepted him with an envelope. "A little girl left this for you," he said, holding out the folded paper. "Appeared in the office yesterday. Caused quite a stir." The millionaire felt his heart race. He took the envelope with slightly trembling hands and opened it right there, without caring about the assistant's curious gaze. It was a simple drawing, made with childish strokes but surprisingly expressive. It showed two figures holding hands, a tall man in a suit and a small girl. Behind them, a house with large windows and a red door. At the top of the page, written in crooked and uneven letters, "My safe place." Something broke inside the millionaire's chest, an emotion so intense that for a moment he thought he would have another panic attack, but it was different. It was as if a small sliver of light opened in a room that had been dark for years. "Are you all right, mister?" asked the assistant, alarmed by the boss's sudden paleness. "I am," he replied, carefully tucking the drawing into the inner pocket of his jacket. "I need to go out. Cancel my appointments for tonight." He drove like a man on a mission, ignoring red lights and speed limits. When he arrived at the warehouse, he was almost out of breath. He entered hastily, calling for the girl, but found only other children who looked at him with distrust. "Where is she?" he asked, trying to control the urgency in his voice. "Went to sell candy at the traffic light," replied an older boy. "Said she needed to buy a present." The millionaire frowned. "A present for whom?" The boy shrugged. "For you, duh. It's your birthday, isn't it?" Indeed it was. He had completely forgotten, as he did every year, deliberately ignoring the date that had once been of celebration and now only brought painful memories. How did the girl know? Had she seen something in the office? He drove to the traffic light, where he used to meet her. Night had already fallen, and the lights of the cars formed colorful streaks on the wet asphalt. He searched frantically among the street vendors, feeling a pang of worry when he couldn't find her. That's when he saw her. On the other side of the avenue, the small figure darted between the stopped cars, her box of candies almost empty. Without thinking twice, the millionaire got out of the car and ran across the street, ignoring the horns and curses of the drivers. "Aunt!" he called, using the girl's nickname for the first time. She turned, surprised, and a huge smile lit up her little face when she recognized him. She ran towards him, almost tripping in her haste. The millionaire crouched down to be at her level, something he would normally never do in public. "Did you get my drawing?" she asked, anxious. "I did. It's the best gift I've gotten in a long time," he replied sincerely. The girl stuck her hand in the patched pocket of her dress and pulled out a small package made of newspaper. "Happy birthday," she said shyly. "It's nothing expensive, but..." The millionaire took the package carefully, as if it were made of the finest crystal. Inside was a small, makeshift picture frame made of colorful popsicle sticks glued together. There was no photo inside, just an empty space. "It's for the picture of your family," she explained, "so you don't have to always leave it on the office desk. You can take it wherever you want." The kindness of the gesture, the perception of the loneliness he carried, the sensitivity of that child who lived on the streets, all of this converged in a moment of absolute clarity. The millionaire knew at that instant that he could no longer pretend that that connection was casual or temporary. "Come here," he said, taking her by the hand. "I want to show you something." They returned to the car, where the millionaire opened the glove compartment and took out his fine leather wallet. From inside it, he carefully extracted an old photograph, folded at the corners from being handled so much. It was the same one the girl had seen in the office, but in a smaller version. "This was my wife," he explained, his voice choked with emotion. "And this baby was our daughter." The girl looked intently at the photograph, touching it with her fingertips, as if she feared damaging it. Then, something strange happened. Her expression changed, her eyes widened, and she visibly paled. "What is it?" asked the millionaire. Frightened by the reaction, the girl dropped the wallet as if it burned her. Her eyes filled with tears, and she collapsed right there, sitting on the car seat, saying between sobs, "That's my mother." The millionaire froze. He picked up the photo again and leaned towards the girl. "What do you mean, your mother?" "It's her," insisted the girl, pointing to the woman in the photograph with trembling fingers. "It's the face I see in my dreams. It's the only thing I remember from before the orphanage." The world seemed to stop spinning for a moment. The millionaire felt the blood run cold in his veins. It was impossible, completely impossible. "What do you know about your mother?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady despite the whirlwind. of emotions. The child told him what little she knew. She had been left in an orphanage at the age of 2 and had run away from there after mistreatment. She only had that memory of her mother, and it was exactly the face in the photo. With trembling hands, the millionaire took out an old handwritten letter from his pocket, which he had found only weeks before among his late wife's belongings. He had never shown it to anyone. It was his deepest wound, his most painful secret. "My wife wrote this before she died," he explained, unfolding the yellowed paper. "I only discovered it recently when I finally had the courage to open the box with her personal belongings." The letter was a confession. After a violent disagreement, his wife, overwhelmed by despair and postpartum depression, had given the newborn daughter to a stranger. Regretful, she tried to get the girl back but never found her again. For years, she lied, saying that the daughter had died at birth. The weight of that secret slowly consumed her, contributing to her premature death. The millionaire had come to hate the world since then, blaming himself for the double loss of the wife and the daughter he believed to be dead. "This can't be a coincidence," he murmured, more to himself than to the girl. But how to be sure? The child, still crying, pointed to a small mark on her own wrist, a birthmark in the shape of a crescent moon. Then with trembling fingers, she pointed to the baby in the photograph, where the same mark was visible on the tiny wrist. The shock of the revelation was like lightning striking the millionaire head-on. All the barriers he had built around. His heart crumbled at once. That little street girl, candy seller, whom fate had placed in his path so improbably, was his daughter. The daughter he had believed to be dead for all these years. "My daughter," he whispered, his voice choked. With an emotion he didn't even know he was still capable of feeling. "My daughter." And in that car, parked on the side of a busy avenue, father and daughter hugged for the first time in almost 5 years, united by a bond that neither time nor separation had managed to completely break. The news spread like wildfire. The powerful millionaire claimed to have found his supposedly dead daughter living on the streets as a candy seller. The tabloid newspapers treated the matter as a modern-day fairy tale, but the more serious vehicles raised uncomfortable questions. Would it be possible to confirm the child's identity? How to prove that it wasn't an elaborate scam? Why had the girl only appeared after the millionaire became one of the richest men in the country? What was supposed to be a miraculous reunion quickly turned into a bureaucratic and media nightmare. The millionaire hired the best lawyers in the country to begin the legal recognition process. The first measure was to remove the girl from the streets and temporarily install her in his penthouse under professional care. "Why can't I take my friends too?" she asked, while watching with distrust the luxurious room they had prepared for her. "They need more help than me." The millionaire, sitting on the edge of the king-size bed that seemed to swallow the girl's small figure, sighed heavily. "It's complicated, honey. We're already facing a lot of problems with your situation. If we bring more children without any documentation or kinship, the authorities may interpret as..." "Interpret as what?" she asked, frowning. "As something illegal," he completed, choosing his words carefully. "But I promise that as soon as we resolve your situation, we'll find a way to help your friends too." The girl didn't seem convinced, but nodded. In the days that followed, she underwent a battery of medical exams, psychological evaluations, and interviews with social workers. The process, although necessary, was invasive and exhausting for someone so young and accustomed to the freedom of the streets, however harsh it was. Meanwhile, the millionaire's corporate world was in turmoil. His erratic behavior in recent months now made sense to the board of directors, but it raised concerns. Some shareholders feared that the scandal would affect the stock value. Others questioned the CEO's sanity, suggesting that the loss of his wife and the never properly processed grief had finally taken their toll. The millionaire's sister, who lived abroad and had only formal contact with her brother since the death of her sister-in-law, returned to the country in haste. Her arrival at the penthouse was marked by a heated argument that the girl managed to partially hear, hidden behind the bedroom door. "Have you completely lost your mind?" questioned the sister with a controlled but indignant voice. "Bringing a street girl home based on a birthmark and a feeling? That's insane, and you know it. You don't understand," retorted the millionaire, with an emotion he rarely demonstrated. "I know it's her. Something inside me recognized it the moment we met, even before we discovered the connection. Intuition is not proof, brother. Missing children are a terrible phenomenon, but they happen every day. What worries me is you, projecting your desires and your guilt onto this situation." The discussion continued, with the sister insisting on the need for DNA tests and rigorous checks before any public announcement. The girl quietly returned to bed, hugging the only toy she had accepted since arriving, a worn teddy bear that the millionaire had bought in a department store, so different from the expensive gifts that his advisors had suggested. The next morning, the girl found the millionaire's sister having coffee on the balcony. The two studied each other in silence until the woman cleared her throat uncomfortably. "Good morning. You must be the girl my brother found." "I have a name," replied the little girl, raising her chin in defiance. "They call me Ant." An involuntary smile appeared on the woman's lips. "That's an interesting name. May I ask why?" "Because I'm small, but I carry heavy things," explained the girl, repeating what she had said to the millionaire at their first meeting. The simple but meaningful answer seemed to touch something in the woman. For a moment, the mask of distrust gave way to a softer expression. "You look like her," she murmured, almost to herself. "Like my sister-in-law, the same eyes." The girl approached cautiously. "Mister showed me pictures of her. She was pretty." "She was," agreed the woman with a lump in her throat, "and kind, despite the problems she faced. My brother was never the same after she was gone." "He's sad," observed the girl, accepting the glass of juice that the housekeeper offered her, "but he's getting less sad now." The observation, so simple and direct, made the millionaire's sister look at the child with new eyes. There was something in her, a maturity, a perception that went beyond her few years, something that reminded her, in fact, of the woman they had all lost. When the millionaire arrived from the company that afternoon, he found his sister and the girl sitting on the living room rug, putting together a jigsaw puzzle. The scene left him momentarily speechless. It was the first time in years that he had seen his sister relaxed, almost happy. "The preliminary results are in," he announced, waving an envelope with the laboratory's logo. "Compatibility confirmed. She is my daughter." The sister stood up, visibly impacted by the news. "So it's true," she murmured, bringing her hand to her mouth. "My niece!" But the joy of the moment was brief. The next morning, the millionaire was surprised by a court summons. The child's maternal grandparents, who until then believed in the granddaughter's death, had been informed of the situation by the media and contested the custody. They claimed that the millionaire, with his history of depression after his wife's death and his obsessive dedication to work, was not emotionally fit to raise a child. Worse still, they insinuated that the alleged miraculous discovery was nothing more than a publicity stunt to humanize the image of the businessman, recently scratched by accusations of unethical business practices. The girl, who was beginning to adapt to the new reality, felt the atmosphere change again. The visits from social workers became more frequent. Lawyers entered and left the apartment in tense meetings. The millionaire closed himself off again, spending hours locked in the office. On a particularly difficult night, the girl woke up screaming after a nightmare. When the millionaire ran to her room, he found her huddled under the covers, trembling. "What is it, honey?" he asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I dreamed that they were taking me away," she sobbed. "That they said you weren't my real dad, and they were sending me back to the orphanage." The millionaire felt his heart squeeze. How to explain to a 6-year-old child the complexity of the legal situation they faced? How to promise that everything would be all right when he himself wasn't sure? "Come here," he called, opening his arms. The girl hesitated for only a second before throwing herself into her father's embrace. It was still strange for both, that physical contact, that demonstration of affection. But at that moment, it was exactly what they both needed. "I promise," he whispered against his daughter's hair, "that I will never let them separate us again, no matter what happens, no matter what I have to do. You are my daughter, and your place is here." The promise, made in the dark of a hastily decorated children's room, echoed with the force of a sacred oath. The millionaire, who had spent years building financial empires, now faced the most important battle of his life, fighting for the right to be the father of a daughter that fate had given him back when he least expected it. The custody process dragged on for weeks that seemed endless. The millionaire dived headfirst into the legal battle, using all the resources at his disposal, but always within the limits of the law. For the first time in years, his focus wasn't on billion-dollar acquisitions or the appreciation of his company's shares. All that mattered was keeping his daughter by his side. The maternal grandparents' lawyers were relentless. They presented psychological reports questioning the millionaire's emotional stability, highlighted his solitary and obsessive life, and insinuated that the girl would be just another project for a man accustomed to collecting professional successes. "They don't understand," the millionaire confided in his sister, who surprisingly had become his greatest ally. "It's not about a whim or an attempt to fill a void. It's about giving her what is rightfully hers, a family, a home, an identity." "I know that," replied the sister, squeezing his shoulder in an unusual gesture of support. "But we have to prove it to the judge, and more importantly, we have to prove it to the girl." The wisdom of those words hit the millionaire deeply. Amidst the legal storm, he had neglected the most important thing: showing his daughter that, regardless of the outcome of the process, she was loved and belonged to that family. That same afternoon, he cancelled all meetings and took the girl for a walk. Not to luxurious places or expensive theme parks, as his advisors had suggested to impress her. Instead, they went to a simple ice cream parlor, then walked through a public park where she could run and play like any normal child. "Here," said the millionaire, extending a small box when they sat on a bench in the shade of a leafy tree. The girl looked suspiciously at the gift. Since moving to the penthouse, she had been flooded with expensive toys and clothes she hadn't asked for and didn't quite know what to do with. "It's nothing expensive," he assured her, noticing her hesitation. "But it's important." Inside the box was a silver locket, simple but elegant. When the girl opened it, she found a photograph of her mother on one side and, on the other, a recent photo of herself with her father, taken unpretentiously by his sister during a breakfast. "So, you always remember who you are and where you came from," explained the millionaire, his voice choked with emotion. "Your past and your present together." The girl was silent, contemplating the two photographs with intensity. Then, without warning, she hugged her father tightly, hiding her face in his chest. "Thank you," she whispered. And then, so low that he almost didn't hear, "Dad." It was the first time she had called him that. The impact of that single word reverberated throughout the millionaire's being, tearing down the last defenses that still remained in his heart. That night, while the girl slept, he made a radical decision. He gathered his top executives and announced that he would be taking an extended leave of absence from the presidency of his companies. He wanted to dedicate himself fully to his daughter's adaptation and to the custody process. "But sir," protested the vice president, "we are in the midst of crucial negotiations. Your absence could cost billions." The millionaire, who months before would have considered such an argument irrefutable, now just smiled serenely. "Some years ago, I lost something much more valuable than money. Now I have the chance to get it back. I'm not going to waste this opportunity." The decision generated headlines and news speculations. Many interpreted it as an admission of emotional instability. Others saw it as a marketing stunt. Few understood what was really happening. A man, for so long lost in his own labyrinth of pain, finally rediscovered the way home. Meanwhile, the girl also faced her own battles. The sessions with psychologists and social workers were exhausting. The supervised visits with her maternal grandparents, whom she barely knew, left her confused and anxious. The sudden change from the streets to a life of privilege caused estrangement and sometimes guilt, especially when she thought about the friends she had left behind. One afternoon, after a particularly difficult session with the court psychologist, the girl was found by the housekeeper sitting on the floor of the gigantic walk-in closet, among piles of new clothes she barely wore. "What are you doing, dear?" asked the lady, worried. "Sorting," she replied simply. "I need to send them to my friends at the warehouse. They need them more than me." The housekeeper, moved, reported the episode to the millionaire. The next day, he surprised his daughter with a proposal. Together, they created a foundation dedicated to children living on the streets. The first project would be a model shelter where her friends from the warehouse could live, study, and receive adequate medical care. "You mean like a family for them?" asked the girl, her eyes shining with excitement. "Something like that," confirmed the millionaire. "A safe place, as you always dreamed." It was the first time he saw her smile without reservations, without the shadow of distrust that normally hovered in her gaze. It was her mother's smile, he realized with a pang in his chest, open, sincere, luminous. The following week, while they worked together on the details of the project, she drawing how she wanted the children's space to be, he transforming those drawings into real architectural plans, the millionaire received a call from his lead attorney. "We have a proposal from the grandparents," he announced cautiously. "They are willing to withdraw the custody contest process with some conditions." The millionaire felt his heart race. What conditions? Regular visits, participation in the granddaughter's education, and, the lawyer hesitated, "they want you to publicly acknowledge responsibility for the disagreement that led your wife to make that drastic decision." The last condition hit him like a punch. For years, he had buried the memories of that terrible night. The heated argument, the harsh words exchanged, his own explosive temper that would later turn into paralyzing guilt. Publicly admitting that role would be opening a deep wound. But then he looked at his daughter, focused on coloring the drawing of what she called "my friend's house." For her, he would face not only public opinion, but his own inner demons. "Tell them I accept the conditions," he replied, with a firmness that surprised even himself. All of them. That night, for the first time since the girl had arrived, it was he who had nightmares. He woke up sweating cold, haunted by the memories he would soon have to confront. As he got up to get a glass of water, he found the door to his daughter's room ajar. He peeked inside and saw that she was sleeping serenely, the locket safe in one of her small hands. Next to the bed, on the nightstand, was a new drawing. A house with large windows and a red door. At the door, two figures holding hands, a man and a girl, watched a group of smiling children playing in the garden. The millionaire felt the tears wet his face, but this time they were not of pain or regret. They were tears of hope, the most precious emotion and also the most fragile. which was finally returning to flourish in his heart. The day of the final hearing arrived, loaded with apprehension. The millionaire woke up before dawn, after yet another night of restless sleep. He found his daughter already awake, sitting on the penthouse balcony, watching the first lights of morning illuminate the city. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, joining her. The girl shook her head negatively. "I'm afraid of what's going to happen today." "Me too," admitted the millionaire in a rare moment of vulnerability. "But we're in this together. Whatever the judge's decision, you'll always be my daughter. Nothing can change that." She held his hand tightly. Despite all the conflicts and uncertainties of recent weeks, a deep bond had formed between the two. A bond that transcended legal documents or DNA tests. In court, the millionaire faced the maternal grandparents for the first time. He saw in their eyes the same pain he carried, the irreparable loss of the woman they both loved. He also saw distrust and resentment, feelings he understood perfectly. In their place, he would probably react the same way. As promised, he accepted the condition of making a public statement about the events that preceded his daughter's disappearance. When it was his turn to speak, he stood up slowly, adjusted his impeccable suit, and looked directly at the judge, at the grandparents, and finally at the girl, who watched everything with frightened eyes next to the social worker. Almost 5 years ago, he began, his voice initially hesitant, but gaining firmness with each word. "I lost my wife to a depression that I didn't recognize in time. Before that, I lost my daughter to my own arrogance and emotional incapacity." The courtroom plunged into absolute silence. The journalists, who had been authorized to follow the case, leaned forward, thirsty for the story that had never been told. That night, we had a terrible argument. I was obsessed with work, frustrated with what I considered weakness on her part. I didn't understand what I now know to be postpartum depression. I said unforgivable things. I threatened to take our daughter from her if she didn't get herself together. Then I left, slammed the door, and went to work, as I always did when things got difficult at home. The millionaire paused, swallowing with difficulty. His eyes met those of his daughter, who watched him with disconcerting intensity. When I returned hours later, she had disappeared with the baby. I found only a note saying that I would be better off without them. In the following days, I received a call, informing me that she was coming back home, but there was an accident on the road. When I arrived at the scene, I only found my wife seriously injured. There was no sign of our daughter. He turned to face the girl's grandparents. "Your daughter, before dying in the hospital, told me that the baby had not survived. I believed it for years. The guilt consumed me. I turned into a different man, too cold, distant, obsessed only with material success because it was the only thing that still made any sense." He turned again to the judge. "I only discovered the truth recently, when I finally had the courage to open the box with my wife's personal belongings. I found the letter where she confessed to having given our daughter to a stranger in a moment of despair. She tried to get her back later, but never succeeded. The guilt of that secret corroded her to the end." The millionaire's voice choked. "I'm not here to justify myself or to deny my responsibility. I'm here to say that I received a miracle that I don't deserve, a second chance that I swear not to waste." He then turned to his daughter, kneeling to be at her eye level. "I know I don't have the right to ask for your forgiveness, nor that of your mother, but I promise for the rest of my life to do everything in my power to be the father you deserve." A heavy silence hung over the room when he finished. The maternal grandparents, visibly moved, exchanged meaningful glances. The girl, with tears running down her face, broke away from the social worker and ran to hug her father. It was that spontaneous hug, more than any legal argument, that tipped the balance. After a brief recess, the grandparents formally announced that they were withdrawing the custody contest, requesting only the right to participate in their granddaughter's life, a condition that the millionaire accepted immediately. When the judge finally banged the gavel, granting final custody to the biological father and establishing a visitation schedule for the grandparents, a collective sigh of relief swept through the room. The most difficult battle was over. But one still persisted, silent and equally important. The girls struggled to adapt to the new life, to trust fully, to believe that this time it would be different, that this time she would not be abandoned. On leaving the courthouse, they were greeted by a group of children from the old warehouse, holding handmade posters with messages of support. The scene, captured by the photographers present, became the image that would grace the newspapers. The next day, the powerful businessman, hand in hand with his reunited daughter, surrounded by the children who had been her only family on the streets. "You came!" exclaimed the girl, running to hug her friends. "Of course we did," replied the older boy, the one who had informed the millionaire about the birthday present. "We're family, aren't we?" The millionaire watched the scene, feeling an overwhelming emotion take over his chest. He realized, perhaps, for the first time with total clarity, that in recovering his daughter, he had not only found a lost piece of his past, he had gained a new perspective on the future, on the real meaning of family and belonging. That night, while tucking his daughter into bed, now officially his both by law and by heart, he asked her, "What do you want most now?" "Anything in the world," the girl thought for a moment, playing with the locket on her neck. "I want to paint my room," she replied finally. "Paint? What color?" he asked, surprised by the simple request. "All the colors. I want to make a giant mural with all of us. You, me, aunt, the grandparents, and my friends from the warehouse. And that house I always drew with the big windows and the red door." The millionaire smiled, feeling his heart overflowing with love. "We'll do it tomorrow. And if you want, we can turn that drawing into reality. Build that house exactly as you imagine it." The girl yawned, her little eyes already heavy with sleep. "It doesn't have to be rich, you know. It just needs to be full of people who love each other." The simple words hit the millionaire like a revelation. He, who had spent years accumulating wealth to fill the void left by the loss, finally understood the most valuable lesson that his daughter paradoxically had learned on the streets. The true value of things is not in their cost, but in the meaning they carry. "Good night, Dad," she murmured, already almost asleep. "Good night, my love," he replied, using for the first time the expression of affection that always caught in his throat. "Tomorrow will be a new day, the first of many." And it was, in fact, the beginning of a new era, not only for the two of them, but for all the lives they touched from that moment on. A year had passed since the final court decision. The millionaire's life had transformed in ways he never imagined possible. The minimalist and cold penthouse gave way to a vibrant home, with children's drawings framed next to valuable works of art and photographs of simple moments occupying previously empty spaces. The mural that the girl had asked to paint in her room became a joint project that occupied several Sunday afternoons. They didn't hire professional artists or renowned decorators. It was just the two of them, with brushes, colorful paints, and much more enthusiasm than technique. The final result was far from perfect. The perspective distorted, the proportions imprecise, some stains where the paint had run. But for both of them, it was the most meaningful work of art in the entire house. The foundation for children in vulnerable situations became a reality, much larger than initially planned. The millionaire redirected a significant portion of his fortune to the project, but more important than the money, he dedicated time, his most precious and previously most protected resource. The house, with large windows and a red door, so recurrent in the girl's drawings, materialized as the foundation's headquarters. It wasn't an ostentatious mansion, but a welcoming space, designed to make children feel safe and valued. The friends from the warehouse were the first to be welcomed. They received quality education, medical care, and above all, dignity. Some were reintegrated into their biological families, with continued support to ensure adequate conditions. Others found carefully selected adoptive families. Some of the older ones, already teenagers, chose to remain in the program until adulthood, receiving preparation for independent living. The girl visited the foundation several times a week, following each progress, celebrating each small victory. She was no longer the candy seller from the traffic lights, but she kept within herself the ant, small, resilient, capable of carrying weights much larger than her size. That part of her would never disappear, nor did her father want it to. The maternal grandparents, initially apprehensive, became a constant presence in their granddaughter's life. The shared trauma of loss, instead of driving them apart, created an unexpected bond. Together, they kept alive the memory of the woman they had all loved, each in their own way. The millionaire's sister, surprisingly, moved back to the country, taking on an active role in the foundation. "She has a lot of you," she commented once, watching her niece methodically organizing an activity with younger children. "The determination, the focus, but she has the compassion of her mother. It's the best of both." That Sunday morning, while preparing a picnic in the park, a tradition they had established to celebrate the small moments, the millionaire watched his daughter carefully arranging the basket. She still had habits acquired on the streets. She saved leftovers, worried about wasting water, organized her belongings with almost military precision. But now these behaviors were accompanied by smiles, by a lightness that grew with each day. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, noticing his contemplative gaze. "About how life takes turns," he replied, helping her close the basket. "About how sometimes we lose our way completely before finding the right direction." The girl nodded, with that wisdom that always surprised him. "Like when you were lost on that rainy day and I showed you the shortcut." The millionaire smiled. "Exactly like that. Only you didn't just show me the way through the streets, you showed me the way back to myself." In the park, they met the grandparents and some children from the foundation for a day of games and relaxation. Watching the scene, his expanded. Family improvised, rebuilt from the ashes of devastating losses, the millionaire felt a peace that he believed he would never recover. "Come play, Dad," called the daughter, waving energetically with a colorful ball. Without hesitation, he put aside his cell phone, his expensive watch, the public profile he had so carefully cultivated, and joined the game. The laughter, the lively voices, the sense of belonging, these were the real treasures he had rediscovered. Later, while returning home under the orange-tinged sky of sunset, the girl held his hand firmly. "You know what I thought today?" she asked, occasionally jumping over the cracks in the sidewalk. "What?" he asked. "That sometimes we need to get lost to find the place where we really should be." The millionaire stopped walking, impressed with the depth of the observation. He crouched down to be at his daughter's eye level. "And where do you think we should be?" She smiled, revealing the small window of a new tooth being born where there had previously been a gap. "Exactly here," she replied simply. "Together. This is our safe place." At that moment, under the golden light of the setting sun, the man who once was known only for his astronomical wealth understood the dimension of true richness. It wasn't in the numbers in his bank accounts, in the skyscrapers that bore his name, or in the corporate empire he had built. It was in the small and confident hand that held his, in the gaze that no longer carried the weight of abandonment, in the ability to forgive and be forgiven, in the second chance that life in its mysterious wisdom had granted to both. The millionaire, who for so many years had felt incomplete despite all his achievements, finally found the missing piece. It wasn't just his daughter, but what she represented: the courage to be vulnerable, the strength that comes from kindness, the wealth contained in simplicity. And the girl, who had known from an early age the cruelty of life on the streets, discovered that sometimes fairy tales can happen, not with enchanted castles or magical spells, but with real, imperfect people willing to open their hearts even after they have been hurt. Together, they had transformed pain into purpose, emptiness into fullness, fear into hope. And in that process, they not only rebuilt their individual lives, but created a legacy that would continue to touch other lives for generations. "Let's go home," he asked, extending his hand. The girl nodded, smiling. "Let's go to our house with big windows and a red door." It was just an expression, of course. The physical house where they lived didn't have a red door, but both knew exactly what those words meant. Home wasn't a place, but a feeling. The certainty of being loved unconditionally, the confidence that this time no one would leave. And as they walked hand in hand down the sidewalk, the millionaire and the traffic light girl, father and daughter, reunited by fate after so many years apart, knew that they had finally found their safe place in each other. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive new stories every day. What would you do in the millionaire's place? Comment below and share this story with someone special.